All right, everybody. Thank you for watching this. This is going to be an interview with myself, and this is Nicole Brenny. Nicole, go ahead and tell everyone a little bit about yourself, please.
Well, my name is Nicole. Obviously, I'm an astrologer, tarot card reader, cards of truth reader, and life coach. And a lot of you might already know me, or at least some of you may know me from Listen to the Stars. It's my YouTube channel dedicated to all of those things, plus spiritual topics in general.
And there is a link down below to her website and her YouTube channel as well.
Yeah, and I actually have to just say thank you, Dan, for having me on, because you were one of the first people I ever interviewed on my channel, and that means a lot to me because when I first started my channel, obviously I was trying to grow my channel and meet people and like build community, and so it's really wonderful that you were on there. So, you know, part of my channel growing was
I did not realize I was there at the early on. You're my second interview on my channel, so.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, and also when we did those interviews, I just remember really enjoying talking to you. Like, we had such a great time and a great conversation. We were talking for a really long time. So it's fun to be back in conversation with you.
Yes, and absolutely. And now I feel like I get to like kind of probe you and ask you some questions, especially because one of the main things about Nicole that is, whereas she's an astrologer like me, we share similar teachers. In fact, my main teacher, I would say, is Ernst Wilhelm, and I think Nicole might even say the same thing. And so,
yes.
yeah.
I should just say Ernst Wilhelm and Michael Reed, I feel like, are both, like, I would say maybe more Ernst because of the cards of truth, but both of them have had like a really profound impact on my astrological knowledge.
Excellent. Yeah, and what she does though is she practices like what she just said is the cards of truth. And so if you're not familiar with this, this is basically, oh gosh, I'm probably gonna butcher this, but it's kind of like a mixing of card readings, like what she's showing there, tarot cards, and astrology.
Yes. So I have all of it here in my little office. Yeah, and it's amazing. So some of you guys might know about my class that I teach with it, but I wasn't even considering studying it, but Ernst was like, no, you should study it. So then I started. So I'm like, okay, if Ernst is telling me to study it, I should study it. And I've gone crazy with it. Like, I'm obsessed with the cards of truth. And now I'm teaching a class. And now that I'm teaching a class, my understanding of it and my relationship with it is like more intense than it's ever been. So you guys should all check it out.
A link below for her classes also. So so what we're going to talk about today is we're going to be talking about Rahu and Ketu.
Mm-hmm.
And we're going to be talking about the lunar eclipse that's coming up here on July 27th. And because that's kind of, you know, that's the nodes being expressed. So, Nicole, so what is your, let's talk about eclipses. What has been your experience with the eclipse, whether just personal experience or astrologically?
Yes. So first I should just say before we get further into this interview, I'm in Costa Rica right now, so my internet's kind of not that good. So if you hear Dan asking me a question, it takes me like a minute to respond. It's not because I didn't hear him. It just took me a while for the audio to come through, or he didn't say anything weird, and vice versa. It's just the kind of bad internet connection. But eclipses are, yeah, there's a little lag. So eclipses are extremely important, but as I just did this interview with Michael Reed on my channel, and he was mentioning this on my channel, and I think it's so important to mention this, but people act like eclipses are this hugely rare thing, but they actually happen every year, and like they're happening this year 3 times, you know, so it's like they're happening all the time. And what I think of them as, rather than like this rare event, is I think of them as a growth process that we're going through. And I've definitely had really important things happen on eclipses or around eclipses. So for instance, if you just look at the last 2 eclipses, I want to say eclipse series, I shouldn't even use the word series, but they come in groups, right? You have like the solar and lunar eclipse all in a group. So we have these groupings of eclipses, and in the August grouping of eclipses, that was impacting my health a lot. So right before the eclipse, I got like a very weird lump in my armpit. Like I thought I had cancer, but
Wow.
I was looking at the astrology of it. So I obviously knew that it was created by the eclipse, but I still went to the doctor and everything. And I just ended up having to cancel all my appointments for 2 weeks right in that intense eclipse window, and just lay in bed with an ice pack on my armpit, hoping that this thing would go away, which right after that window ended, the thing went away. But of course, it was just like this really intense time for me. So we had that happening. So obviously that's like a personal thing that happened on the last eclipse. And then there was an eclipse right around Valentine's Day. So what ended up happening then was I went through a relationship breakup, and we got back together, but it was just like one of those times where it was like, okay, this eclipse energy was really bringing up a lot of that kind of stuff for me. And this eclipse already has had a profound impact on me, because now I was on vacation, but now I'm living in a foreign country. So this whole eclipse series has been like pretty intense. But
Right.
eclipses are usually only like actually going to create an event or something super intense like this if they're impacting a planet in your chart, or an angle, or a house cusp. So I always use house cusps. I think that's probably something you use as well if you studied with
Right.
Ernst.
Mhm.
But that's really what you want to look at. Otherwise, the way that I see eclipses impacting people is that they more so show growth, like an area of growth in your life. So I've made videos about this too, but what I think of the eclipses as are like these moments throughout the year that we're shedding our skin. So I always relate the eclipses to snakes or to serpents, because as some of you might know, the planet Rahu, which is actually not a planet, but it's called a shadow planet or a graha. So it's this kind of like mathematical point in the sky. But Rahu represents the serpent's head, and Ketu represents the serpent's tail. So we can already see this relationship between the north and south node of the moon, the north node being Rahu, the south node being Ketu, and serpent energy. And luckily for me, snakes are one of my top 2 favorite animals. And so I know a lot about snakes. I actually have a pet snake. And what happens with snakes is that they shed their skin very regularly. But snakes shed their skin for mostly only one reason, that being that they're growing. So as you feed a snake, especially when it's younger, it grows. And as the snake grows, the skin becomes tighter because it's gaining weight. And as the skin becomes tighter, it doesn't just flake off like our skin will just flake off a little flake here or there or whatever. It actually waits until all the skin has flaked up, and then it all comes off in one long piece. So these eclipses are showing these moments that we have grown in a certain area of our life, which is depicted in the placement of the nodes. So there'll be a nodal axis. So it's showing this in your nodal axis. The nodal axis is basically showing where Rahu and Ketu are in your chart, which will be in 2 of the 12 houses of the zodiac, because Rahu and Ketu are more so like an infinity symbol. So wherever Rahu is, Ketu will be on the opposite side. And I'll show you more about this later if we get into that. But they'll always be 180 degrees from each other. So the growth that you're experiencing is always going to be in whatever houses are on one side of this line and the other side of this line. And so when you're going through this growth, you're actually going through this growth during an entire 18-month period. That's how long the nodes take to go through a single sign. So this single axis, it takes 18 months to go through this axis. So this whole time, for the past over 1 year now, we've all been growing in the axis of Leo and Aquarius. And this will be impacting the houses in our charts in different ways, depending on what your rising sign is. And these eclipses are just showing those moments during this growth process where either you're really integrating some of that growth, or you're shedding something and letting go of something. And these are moments where it can be kind of confusing, it can be kind of terrifying, But if you examine the way that a snake sheds its skin, it's always a time where you kind of need to go within yourself and take time for yourself to, you know, honor the growth that you're going through.
You
Does that
know,
make sense?
this, oh, absolutely makes a lot of sense. I mean, because I'm sitting here reflecting on kind of what you're saying in my own personal life, knowing what my chart looks like, and knowing that, like in Leo, I have Saturn and Mars, and Saturn is my Makaraka. And holy moly, if this hasn't been a swirling time of what am I going to do? How am I going to do it? What's the, like, I feel like the page, like I'm turning into a new chapter right now. And so
Yeah.
it's really a fascinating time. And I think with Rahu and Ketu, you know, being that they're shadowy planets, like
Yes.
they, like I said, it's like a swirl. It's not just like it's really easy and really simple. It's just like, what's going on? How am I going to do this? How is this going to happen? And like it can be somewhat they can bring about, I think, somewhat of like a crisis moment in their growth.
Yes. Yes, I studied with a Western astrologer for some time, and she would often relate the eclipses to like kind of crisis moments. And I can definitely see that, but I also feel like when you're an astrologer and you're really aware, like, oh, I'm going through an eclipse right now, it's more so just like, I don't know, it is the shedding of the skin. It's like looking at all these things that you need to let go of, but also it's like a weird thing because it's not just shedding your skin. It's looking at all these things that you're letting go of, plus all the things that you're gaining. And to some people that can feel like a crisis, and to other people that can feel like a revelation. So that's actually what's happening to me right now, because this particular eclipse, the partial solar eclipse that just happened July 12th through 13th, depending on where you were in the world. Well, this had a huge impact on like my home life, right? So, you know, there's a lot of different factors that can show your home life. But I've been going through this process of like, I literally have like a whole life in the United States that I let go of to experience something new. And to some people that can feel like, oh my gosh, I'm having a crisis of who I am and what I
Now,
believe in and everything. But to me, it's like, I just see it kind of as like this, and it
what,
is like a 180-degree
now,
thing.
would you say you're experiencing this because Rahu is going through, you know, Rahu representing, you know, foreign lands, territories, Karaka for this kind of stuff, going through the sign of Leo, which is typically like, in one idea of Leo is that it's like it's your domain.
I think what's happening is, I think there are like a lot of other things that are happening in like my progress chart and in my solar return chart. Like my solar return chart is like, okay, it would be crazy if I didn't live in a foreign country and this kind of thing. And also my cards of truth spread. So my cards of truth spread, it was just like spot on. There's one card that, well, there are plenty of different cards that show moving, right? So one of those cards that shows moving is the Five of Spades, and the Five of Spades has been on my ecliptic card, or the path that I'm walking on, for the last 2 years, ending on my birthday in July. So I've been experiencing this energy up until, you know, my birthday in July. And this card was activated. It activated last year at some point, which brought a lot of change into my life because the Five of Spades is a card of change. And it activated again for a final time during the final period of my yearly spread. So hopefully this isn't so confusing for people, but basically this energy of this card was activated, which is huge change. It's like it's a foundational kind of change. Fives are always going to be a turning of the page, because if you look at your hands, you have 10 fingers. And so the fifth finger is always the change to the next hand. So it's always going to bring some kind of a change. And the spades are the most foundational element. So it's always going to be a change in like a really huge way. And it can be any kind of change, but it's just saying like a massive change. And this happened in a card that let me think about which card it was. Now I have to look at my own chart because I'm thinking now about my new chart, but I believe it was in the Three of Hearts. Let me see. Yeah, it happened in the Three of Hearts. So, and the Three of Hearts is also a card of like flying apart from that which you love. So it can be like a relationship, it can be a home, it can be, I've seen the Three of Hearts come up a lot for people that it's not necessarily a card of moving so much, but it ended up being that because I also had an ace of diamonds activated, which is the card of a new home. So that happened. And then for my new year, in my 7-year progression, so sorry if I'm already losing people, but we'll quit talking about this in a second. But in my 7-year progression, my one card that doesn't activate any other cards is a 2 of diamonds, which is like the card of also real estate, new home, all of that. So it was like, because of all these other energies coming into play, plus these eclipses happening so close to parts of my chart that have to do with home, that's why I'm experiencing this now. But it's, I'm sure there's more factors that I could look at. It was just like a lot of things adding up. You don't ever want to just look at one factor and try to make a prediction.
Oh, goodness gracious. Absolutely. I could not agree with you more on that. I mean, I think that is so important that it's like, okay, like I always look at it like this, if I see something in there, third lord in the fourth, that dasha is going on or something, which is like,
yes,
right. It's like, okay, well, that's like clue number 1.
Yes, third and fourth lords being activated at the same time, definitely a good time to move. And, like I'm always just thinking about the cards lately. I was just talking to Dan about this. I was like, I've just been in cards of truth world and not astrology world. So it's like fun to talk about the nodes, but I'm also just like more so thinking about numbers and.
Well, let me ask you this though. Let me ask you this real quick, because this is something that that I wanted to talk about. I was actually planning on talking about this later, but since we're already in this topic right now, is about numbers, about the because I kind of had this realization the other day. I was looking at something, just crunching some numbers, basically, like looking at some income stuff, and and then it was like, and it told me a story that I couldn't argue with. Because, we have this saying, right, that it's like the numbers don't lie.
Yes.
And what I made the connection with right then and there was there's a connection between numbers and reality. And so,
yes.
And I think in astrology, I think we kind of take for granted the importance of the numbers themselves. I think that just on a very broad level in astrology, that typically gets lost. Like we'll talk about first house, second house, third house, et cetera, but we'll just go right past the number 3 or the number 2, and we'll just talk about the connotations associated with. Do you have anything you'd like to talk about? Because it seems like the cards really are so strongly numerically based.
Yes, and I've literally spent the last 2 weeks because I've been taking a little bit more time for myself for contemplation, which is also the result of this eclipse. Like this eclipse is making it so that no part of me really wants to be putting energy into working. It's like all like internal and everything. So I'm trying to honor that. And I've been spending a lot of time on the ocean. Like if I go surfing and the waves aren't very good, or if I go surfing with someone else and the waves are good for them and I'm just waiting for them, I'll actually take like a stick. I'll take a stick, and then I have this huge canvas in the sand, and I've been doing these mathematical equations and like drawing shapes and like thinking about the numbers, and like people walk past me like, who is this crazy woman in a bikini? Like I was like drawing the signs of the zodiac, like everything in like a huge like football field size piece of paper, doing this kind of thinking because I've been thinking so much about how amazing these numbers are. And I think that Ernst has done an amazing job. I don't know if he like necessarily came up with all this information, but he's at least done an amazing job of like putting together information about how the numbers match the cards and the numbers match the planets. And I firmly believe that there's more connections there to be made. So as part of my Cards of Truth class, I spent an entire class just talking about the elements, which was a 2-hour-long class. And then I spent an entire just talking about the numbers. And whenever people have questions, as we have gone through into the more advanced stuff, those 2 classes are always classes that I reference. I actually have the notes for those classes printed off right here. Nice. And it's amazing how many of the questions about any of the complex topics that we talk about are answered with just these 2 worksheets or handouts that I created. And it's not like I'm saying, oh, I came up with this, because I didn't, but understanding just the basic foundations of what the numbers mean and what they mean in like the most simple way. Like I just said, like, okay, you have 10 fingers. So why does the number 5 represent change? Like you just think about things in this really basic way. Like I didn't think about this because I read a book about it. I was just staring at my hands one day and I was like, oh my God, the number 5, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. It's the change from one hand to the next. Of course, the number 5 represents change. And then you draw some kind of a shape that has 5 sides. You see that.
Right. And I could see where that, because like if you look at it, so 5 is a very important number. Like 5 is a certain amount of, and I'm just discovering this as you're talking right now. You know, like 5 is a very whole and a very complete number. It's like you fill up one thing. You have, like you said, you have 5 fingers on a hand. There's the 5 Panchamahabhutas, you know, the 5 elements. And so that like it kind of represents a whole. So anything, once you achieve that number, once you get to that, it's like you have to branch out to go somewhere else. I don't know. So
yes, it makes sense. I was just going to say something else as you were saying that about the number 5, but I'll have to come back to it. But it's an extremely important number. And it's actually one of the numbers that people get really afraid of because in the cards of truth, it's like a challenge number and it's like a scary number. But yeah, so there's so many links that you can make. So the number 5 is related to Jupiter, but then you also think about the number 5 in the zodiac and what fifth sign. It's Leo. And so actually it's really important that we're talking about, I just randomly pulled the number 5. I didn't plan to pull the number 5, but I'm glad that I did because Leo is where these eclipses are happening now. Obviously the lunar one or the partial solar eclipse we just had was in Cancer, but coming up, this is going to be in Leo. And people will wonder, well, what does the number 5 with Leo have to do with change? And that was a question that came up in one of my classes, and everyone was like kind of confused and coming up with random stuff. And I didn't even really know the answer to that question until I contemplated it for some time. But the 5 relates to Leo, and Leo in some texts relates to, I don't know if you've seen this, but I learned this, that Leo relates to the heart, right? Have you heard that? Leo, the sign of Leo relates to the heart.
I've heard it as relating to the body cavity down here, but I've also heard about it being related to the heart. I think there's 2 different.
To the heart.
Texts. Yeah.
But then Cancer relates to the chest. Isn't that interesting? Okay, so now I have 2 things to say about this. And this is like something that I was like, wow, this makes sense to me. Because I looked through a bunch of different translations of like what body parts the signs relate to. So Leo, I kept seeing relates to the heart, not to the chest, but to the heart. And Cancer to the chest. So where is the heart? It's in the chest, right?
Right.
So think about also the relationship between the rulers of Leo and Cancer. Leo is ruled by the sun. Cancer is ruled by the moon. Where does the light of the sun go into? When we look up at the sky at night and we see the moon shining really brightly, what we're seeing is actually the sun's light reflected in the moon. So the sun is in the moon. So the sun, the heart, is in the chest. Cancer. Right? So it's like you see these relationships that tell a story that you can understand just by going outside and observing nature and thinking about it for a little while using these numbers.
And I would say even through like meditation, I've kind of experienced this too, where like the power of the heart, you know, like of our heart space. And like of love flowing through it, and like that realization, you know, that kind of like that really is all that there really is, right? Like at its core level, it's like it's all love and it's all heart. And if you think about what the sun represents like the core of anything. I mean, like Parashara in the description of the planets, in chapter 3, he talks about the sun being the soul of all. And so Leo to be incorporated through or be related to the heart, that makes a lot of sense because that's really tying into like the core of our experience and who we are comes down to this. So.
Yes. And the sun is the number 1. It's related to the number 1. So you take Cancer 4 plus the number 1, you get 5 Leo. So why does Leo have to do with change? Now, this is a question that I really had to think about, but it comes down to the heart. So what does the heart actually do? And this, I think this is important to talk about. So everyone's like, well, this has nothing to do with the eclipse, but it absolutely does. So why does the heart represent change? So what does the heart actually do? Yeah, now I'm just asking you.
Connecting to something else, right?
Yes, but now I'm just speaking in like more basic terms. So I'll just, instead of just sitting here thinking about it, I'll just explain it. But think about when you go running, your heartbeat goes up and then you stop running and it goes down. And then you start running again and it goes way high up and then it goes way high down. And when you're sleeping, it really slows and everything. The heart is regulating everything. The heart itself, the way that it has to participate in keeping you alive is it has to change. Your heart rate has to change to keep you alive. It needs to make adjustments. And it's actually related to adjustment through the tarot cards. So this, in the sign of Leo, we make necessary adjustments to arrive at Virgo, which Virgo is like, in a way, one of these signs of like perfection. And, it's like the sign of the Virgin. It's like this pristine perfection in a kind of way. But Virgo is related to the number 6, which also has to do with fulfillment.
Right.
So Leo is all about these adjustments. So now we have Rahu coming into Leo for all of us, in the whole world. And I think it's important to understand what kind of adjustments that you are making in your own life, what kind of adjustments you can make in order for you to let your light shine, or what adjustments are natural for you to be an individual. And because we have Ketu in Aquarius, to make these adjustments without hurting other people, with keeping in mind maybe the opinions of others, but also in a way not needing to depend on other people's opinions, because any adjustments that we're making at this time are necessary for who we are as individuals. And I always speak about the sun as being the spark of the divine that we are.
Now, so another thing going on real quick, I just want to mention this about this eclipse, is the conjunction of Mars with Ketu and the moon in Aquarius. And you talked about, what's really interesting, you talked about opinions, and Mars is that planet also of, opinionation and idealism, and of activity and will and siblings, co-workers. So
yes, and I also was just thinking about how it's so nice that you have Aquarius opposite Leo, because it's like that wind can make that flame grow bigger or smaller, or blow the, sometimes wind can blow the flame out. So now you have Mars that's like adding this extra fire or whatever. But I would say with Mars and Ketu, it's really about understanding your use of will during this time and how you're using your will in a positive way. And with Mars and Ketu together, like, I think for most people, I feel this so strongly right now, like the need for physical exercise or healthy physical outlets is more important than ever. Because yes, there can be problems with all these things and anger issues and all of that, but I always try to think first of how you could prevent that. And so for me, I've been exercising more than I have in like the past 4 years of my life. And it's felt really natural. There's more energy to do that.
Well, and when I look at eclipses too, what I try and look at is what's being eclipsed and what's causing the eclipse. And so in this situation, it's like you have Mars and Moon being eclipsed. So like, I know that some people say that like Mars and Ketu, this is a very, very general description of Mars and Ketu, and I don't necessarily ascribe to this, is like Mars and Ketu, this could be a time of volcanoes or things like exploding. Well, actually, that's the thing that's being eclipsed. Like, that's the thing that's being suppressed in here. And then I try and look at all these little combinations when I see this, and then Mars and Moon together. Like Mars and Moon is like, that person is like that go-getting energy, right? Like, I see that, that's what I want, and I'm going to go get it. And like, that is kind of being suppressed and kind of held down by like, this is what I've been kind of toying with, and what I see with the eclipse.
Yes.
Is like, I see that, I can see.
Well, and Mars.
Yeah.
Oh, sorry. And Mars will be retrograde still, I believe, too.
Right.
So you have to factor that in.
Right. And so, and just looking at this, the way I see this, the way I've kind of looked at the eclipse is, I just read it honestly, like I've just been looking at the eclipse like I would look at it in a natal chart and what I would think that it would mean. And I was looking at it and be like, well, Rahu with Sun, You know, that's kind of like it's like that. It's like this blown up importance of like I am so like important, which I see that can operate in two different ways. I see that as something where it can be like it could be like an ego thing, like your ego structure, you know, is kind of like overshadowing, you know, other people's and people around you, you know, like if you're in a coworker, maybe you went to your boss and said, hey, you know, I think I need a raise because I'm so much better than all these other people. And I think that's one way of looking at it, but I also think that it could be kind of the kind of on the different end of the spectrum too, where it could be you could be dealing with situations where your responsibilities and the things that you have to take care of, those important things in your life, are being put to the forefront and blocking, kind of suppressing your what you want to do, where you want to put your energy. It's like, yeah, like, oh my gosh, I have to pay these bills. I have to go do this, you know, or maybe a new thing like that pops up. And in the meantime, you're like, I just want to go to the beach. You know, I don't know. That's kind of how my little rudimentary thinking has gone lately about what this eclipse could represent. Because that's how I would kind of read it in a birth chart.
I love that. I actually really, really love that. And I'll take it a step further too, because I always think of the nodes not as like you're leaving Ketu and you're going to Rahu, because that's like an easy way to think about it. And I find myself accidentally saying stuff like that, like, oh, you're moving away from the first house and you're moving towards the seventh house. Like, I'll catch myself thinking that way. But I created this little easy drawing that I think is more exemplative of how the nodal energy works. And this is interesting because it looks like an 8, and 8 is the number associated with Rahu. But you always have Rahu and Ketu, but they're always connected. And to me, it's more about like an integration process. So even though I have all this work to do, but I just want to be at the beach, like that's one way of using that energy. Like, okay, I'm just going to go to the beach and I'm going to forget about my job and my career. Or the best use of that energy is, okay, since I only want to be at the beach, but I still have these responsibilities, why don't I spend this time at the beach clearing my mind, taking care of myself, maybe doing some mathematical equations in the sand, so that when I come back to my career, I have a lot more beautiful energy to put into my career than I did before I just decided I wanted to be at the beach all day.
Right. And another, yeah. And I was going to say another way to look at the integration, I'm sorry for interrupting, is like another way. So like exactly like what you said. I mean, this is what I was thinking about also, which is like, yeah, you can look at that, you know, Rahu is separated here, pulling you away from this Ketu thing. But it can also be like about learning how to express yourself within your workplace amidst your coworkers and stuff, you know, where you're like to learn how to use your individuality and what makes you unique to help those around you to go to the beach. It's like, I can go to the beach because I'm a shiny person. I don't know.
Yeah, well, now we're getting more specific of Leo and Aquarius, so more so of what this eclipse is going to be about for people. And I do so much life coaching, and I've coached a lot of people while I've been here. And most of the coaching issues that have come up in the last month have been so much about, I want to do this and be this person in my life, but I feel afraid of being this person or doing this thing because I'm scared of what people will think of me. And so a lot of this lesson is that, you know, people are being very pulled into the Ketu, where Ketu is right now, which is what is comfortable, which is Aquarius, which is making everyone else happy and kind of letting go of your own personal identity so that you can fuel the identity of the group that you think you belong to. Right. But what this eclipse is asking people to do is to walk into fear, like walk into the unknown. So Rahu can be kind of scary because it's like this unknown thing. And to be able and willing to be in that energy of Leo, which is like totally letting your light shine. And because you let your light shine, you will feed the group, you will fuel the group. So the image I gave to one of my clients the other day is, I don't know, did you grow up Catholic or going to church?
Not at all.
Okay, so I grew up Catholic, lucky me. I actually went to a Catholic school, and during Christmas Mass, they have this beautiful Mass at midnight. And what happens at midnight is everyone in the entire church gets a white candle, and it's pitch black inside of the church, but the only person that has a candle is the priest. One candle, right? So that candle is burning, you can see it, and soon the two, I forget the word, the two servers that are the people that help him in the mass take their candles and they light their candle from his candle. Then they walk down the aisles, and at each aisle they light the first person's candle in the row, and then that first person shares with the person next to them. And from that one flame, every single candle in the entire church, which ends up being like 200 or 300 candles, gets lit, and the whole room is lit up. So like, this is a very powerful image for this eclipse, because you only have this one flame. So you're my client, you're coming to me and you're like, I want to be a published author, but I'm afraid of what my family is going to think of me if I quit the family business to write a book. This desire that you have, this passion that you have, right? This creative self-expression that you have, all these things relate to Leo. That's your one flame that you have, that you're holding in the front of this church. When you let Aquarius, the wind element, be too strong and take over your life, it blows this flame out. It completely blows this flame out. And then now you're standing, not only are you in darkness, but everyone in the entire church is in darkness, right? If you let that wind element into your life a little bit, just a little bit, it keeps that flame lit, right? Because without wind, that flame will go out. And you invite the interaction of others in without letting your flame out, then everyone gets lit up. And that's the part that we don't feel when we're in these eclipses, or hopefully now, after we've experienced this Leo Aquarius energy, most people are starting to get it. But this is the final lesson. This is the final chapter of the Leo Aquarius polarity. So really, I think most everyone, even me, so I'm actually going through this right now, exactly the same as everyone else. So I'm not exempt. We all have to remember we only have this one flame. And if we just are patient, so there's a lot about patience with this eclipse. If we're just patient, and if we let the wind in just enough to allow that to fuel the fire of the flame, then we can light everyone up and everyone benefits. And that's the integration process of this eclipse. And everyone's going to be experiencing that in a different area of life. So,
you know, and I'd like to touch on your graphic right there real quick.
Yes.
Like, I am all about the accesses. You know, like I'm very, 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 very aware of, I actually have videos on my YouTube channel about Aries, Libra, Taurus, Scorpio. You know, all of these things are so important. It's because it's like when you have something in one, right? Like if you have your first house in a Rashi, like Sagittarius, then Gemini is going to become a very important energy for you to kind of learn to encompass. But it's not just encompass, but it's like to grow with and to use that energy, like what you're talking about with the idea, the flow of like the infinity sign. I think that's a wonderful way to describe the axes, because, and then when we're talking about the nodes, I always look at the nodes as, especially when I'm looking just in a natal chart, I always think about the nodes as a paradox or as a conundrum, because to say something is the head without a body and then the one is a body without a head, I mean, both of those are a paradox. Could you imagine not being able to see where you're going? Or could you imagine not having a body to go where you want to see? Like, I mean, and that's the thing too, is to always, when I think about Rahu and Ketu, is they are one entity. They are one entity. Now they have been, you know, I think it was Brahma or Vishnu came in and threw his Shudarshana chakra and chopped off the demon's head or whatever. And, you know, and then that created the separation between Rahu and Ketu. But Rahu and Ketu are, Rahu represents the head of Ketu's body, etc. You know, I mean, they are the one. And this is kind of like, I always feel like this is where you're kind of like, kind of being pulled, and it's a very uncomfortable area.
It's uncomfortable, but remember that they drank the elixir, so they are immortal. So in a way, they represent immortality, and they're related to the moon. So they're called the nodes of the moon. Some astrologers don't really like to use that terminology, but the moon, I feel, relates so much to creativity and to the birth cycle. So when you think of them as like they are immortal, well, look at this. This is like a self-renewing image. This is something that like goes on and on forever. So this is like a symbol of immortality, right? It's like self-renewing. So that's why people get scared of the nodes, or they get scared of the eclipses. But what's amazing about these eclipses, and also about the nodes in your chart, is they really show one of the most powerful places, that one of the most powerful areas, well, I just said the same thing twice, but the most powerful 2 areas of your life that can like self-generate, like literally a self-generating power that you have in your chart, that like if you kind of flow with the Rahu side of it, Ketu will just feed it naturally. You're always perfecting Ketu, so you have to put energy there somewhat, but it's like once you kind of get this thing going, this Rahu and Ketu axis, life can kind of work on its own for you. But it's just that we have so much struggle there. And I think it's the part of ourselves that doesn't believe, it's like the part of ourselves that is scared of death or something. You know, it's like that's the part of us that keeps us from being able to step into this. Two are 8 and 9. 8 and 9 are the most spiritual numbers. 8 is friendship, 9 is divine friendship. At the 8 at Rahu, we discover that whatever beliefs, whatever energy we carry within us shows itself on the outside. So whatever within is also without. And that's very powerful, because if you have a lot of amazing, wonderful beauty within yourself, then you will have an amazingly beautiful, powerful life. But it's really hard to contain that energy and to destroy the ego to get that to that point. Then at the 9, we kind of merge into that God consciousness, that unconditional love, that unconditional peace, or I don't want to say unconditional peace, but that unending peace, and that really spiritual aspect of ourselves. Like Ketu is one of the most spiritual grahas, right? It's like the karaka for moksha. Yeah. So I think I just like kind of went off in a different direction, but just to explain that the cycle that we're talking, this graphic is just really showing how powerful these nodes are. And that's why, like, you know, these can show the biggest points of karma in your chart.
Yeah. I mean,
these eclipses should be used.
I would never dream of doing a reading for somebody without focusing right away on the Ketu Rahu axis. Because, I mean, it's like you're just going to nail it at that point. It's like it all branches out from there. I mean, it's nice to talk about their ascendant and, you know, what their other planets are doing, yada, yada. But it's ultimately why they're coming to you and what they're going to want to hear. And the thing that's going to really validate them from what you bring them with their astrology reading, I really feel like, is when you start breaking down the nodes and explaining, you know, and offering guidance of how to make it through those 2.
Yes, and a lot of the struggles that people have in life are from their Rahu placements, honestly, and it's because it's like that's where we're trying to grow. So you're like this little tiny snake, and you're going to get bigger, but it's scary to grow and grow into this area that you've never been before, like wherever Rahu's in your where you've never been, and that can be scary. Actually, one of the ways that I like to describe where Rahu is imagine you're at a swimming pool and there's a bunch of people swimming around, and the lifeguard decides that he wants to go on his lunch break, but there's no other lifeguards around to take over his position. But he sees a 3-year-old kid, and he's like, you know what, this kid, I'm going to have him watch the pool quick. I'm going to go eat a sandwich, then I'll be back. So the 3-year-old kid that he gets to watch over the pool, one day he's going to be an Olympic swimmer, one of the best you've ever seen. He's going to be the greatest swimmer. He's going to be on all the front covers of the newspaper. He's going to be on TV. And he is now in charge of this pool. So pretty soon someone falls into the pool and starts swimming, and the kid's like, okay, I guess I'm lifeguarding. I got to go save him. The 3-year-old kid jumps in, and then he realizes, oh, wait, I can't swim yet. Like, he has it within himself. He too thinks that he's this great swimmer, but he jumps into the pool. He's only 3. He doesn't know how to swim yet. They both drown, right? You're that 3-year-old kid. Wherever your Rahu placement is, you might think like, oh, I already have this figured out. I'm going to be great. And the truth with this Rahu and Ketu thing is that you could definitely be great. You could definitely be an Olympic swimmer. But Rahu and Ketu take time. It's only until you reach the age of 48 that both of these nodes mature. So we cause a lot of problems for ourselves where these nodes are. And I think about this a lot with my nodes, and I'm like, I see myself really having trouble where my Rahu is, but I just allow myself to feel like, I just remind myself that, okay, this is an area of my life where I'm going to be learning difficult lessons. And Rahu for me has a huge emphasis on just who I am. So there's always going to be parts of myself that will be confusing. Like I'll never truly understand who I am, probably until I'm 50. But I allow myself a lot of patience, and I also allow myself to recognize life as a growth process. Like I'm here to learn. And I think when you start to put into your Rahu placement an attitude of learning and acceptance, that you can really like flow with it, and life can become so magical.
Right.
Because life isn't supposed to be easy.
You know, and I think about Rahu as like everything you said it's Rahu on the one hand, it's like you can look at it on the one side here where it's like about fear, it's about confusion, it's about being a place that's unknown and something that's completely foreign to you. But on the other hand, Rahu is about thinking outside the box. Rahu is about breaking your established constructs and barriers to take you somewhere new. I mean, that's why Rahu is a karaka for technology, because technology is something that, like they say that necessity is the mother of invention. And then Rahu is the karaka of technology. It's like Ketu can represent like this is where you think. You've never gone outside of this little sphere right here, you know, and that's what you were comfortable with. That's like your past life karma was that. Like you stayed in there. You were overly dependent upon that little bubble. And then Rahu is about getting outside of that bubble. So right away, you know, you're kind of like, yeah, there's fear. It's like, oh my gosh, am I gonna have to get out of this bubble? I've never been outside of this. But once you actually do, and once you embrace it, and once you accept it, and once you give into it, and you realize that what you're supposed to create here is not this, it's this. You know, you're supposed to create balance between the two. And like you want that energy in that infinity symbol, you want that energy moving evenly and slowly between the two, if you want to call them two, you know, between that one.
Yes. Well, think about it as like an Ouroboros, like the snake eating its tail. I think that's probably like a more accurate symbolism of Rahu and Ketu. Well, like the Ouroboros could be here. It's just that you twist it.
Right.
You know, like I always like to do this, and I don't have my hair thing with me, but sometimes I do this for clients. Like you have this full complete circle, right? Oneness, and then you twist it. And that's when you get the nodes, you get the 8, right? So it's like, there's something too with just that ability where you take something whole and complete and you change it to that, basically divide it in 2. And that's how, when you get perspective, now I'm just going off on a tangent, but now you get perspective, relationship, you get the number 8 as well, which is balance within versus balance without, inside and outside. So maybe someone can take that a little bit deeper.
Right.
Now, I really am being tangential right now, but I wanted to say something about the 8 and 9 though too. So, well, I was going to say one last thing. We were talking a lot about like, okay, Ketu and then Rahu, like where you're comfortable and then where you're going to. But remember the numerology of it. Rahu is 8. Ketu is 9. So the number for Ketu comes after Rahu. So this is like another reminder that we must always take what we learn at Rahu and bring it back to Ketu. So you never just stay in Rahu. You take what you learn from Rahu and you bring it back to Ketu. So that's also the powerful numerology of 8 and 9, and seeing like Ketu is actually number 9. If Ketu is 8 and Rahu is 9, then it's like, okay, we stop. We go from Ketu to Rahu, and then we just live out in Rahu the rest of our days. But no, Rahu is always this. Yeah, I know, right?
Yeah. So I have some, you've answered some of these questions that I have written down here for you. And so, so what I want to talk about now is kind of a little bit more like, we're talking about like now talking about the nodes. You know, we've talked about really like, I think comprehensively what their energy really represents and what it's all about. But now like in a practical astrological sense, you know, in an analytical sense now, how can you tell what the nodes are representing? So are you looking for their sign placement, house placement, other planets, etc.? What's your process that you go through?
So you want to look at everything that's being involved with the nodes. So do you care if I share your birth chart? Because I have it here.
No, I have it in the background right here. Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, so I can share this screen with everyone. And I probably won't have time to do like a full interpretation, but let me just explain how like I could examine these nodes. So first off, you always want to look at the house that each of the nodes is placed in. And I have the outer planets on this chart, but I never look at the outer planets with the nodes like as an interpretive thing, but so we'll just ignore that. But you always want to look at the house and the sign, and both of these two elements will tell different things about the nodes. So K2 again is like showing that comfort level, like an area that you're perfecting, but also an area that you might spend so much time in, and maybe you shouldn't be spending so much time in because you need to move into your Rahu. So this is your chart. So it's in the sign of Aries. Aries is super independent. It's super about like who you are as an individual, developing your individuality, maybe trying to be impulsive. It's very much oriented on the process of like your personal journey of self-discovery. So it can be really comfortable for you to kind of focus on yourself and focus on who you are and want to be independent. And in order to see like how much of that will be true, I would look at the ruler of K2, which is Mars. Also, astrologers, when they look at K2, they'll also look at Mars and the quality of Mars, and if Mars is damaged in the chart, to understand how K2 will reveal itself. That's called K2 Kujava. So K2 is like Mars. That's kind of what that means. So I could also look at how your Mars is doing. So Mars is suffering a bit from Saturn. So your K2 might have some struggle. You know, your K2 might have some struggle when it comes to like your own process of discovering your identity. And the area of where this is going to happen is in your personal resources. So you could feel really comfortable trying to create resources for yourself, and you might want to be totally financially independent and to be able to take care of your responsibilities on your own. But there could be somewhat of like, I want to say identity crisis, but I don't think that's the right terminology. I feel like it's just like, it impacts a bit like your personal path of self-discovery, or your personal path of self-discovery keeps that from coming into fruition in the way that you want it to. And the way that I could explore that further is I could look at where Mars is from K2. So it's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 from K2. And it's second from the ascendant. So second and fifth house things can impact also the way that you use that K2 and the way that the karma of K2 plays out. So it could definitely play out in financial things in terms of like maybe trying to take risks financially, because the fifth house has to do with speculative business. And it could also do with like creative self-expression, especially when it comes to writing or speaking and all of that. So there could just maybe be something about like your persona or your identity and like that trying to use that and trying to make money in a certain way. So does that make sense?
Yeah, well here, and I'll give you an example and you'll see how this really crystallizes. Okay, so when I was like, let's see here, 27, 28, 29, I was working in a restaurant, in a very busy restaurant. And so I was the bartender. And so I would make all the well drinks, all the tickets are coming up from all the tables in the restaurant, right? And I still have the, bar stools in front of me. And there's another bartender working down here, right? And I used to be like so territorial. Like, no,
wait, let me just, okay. I made a mistake, so I don't want to sound stupid online. So wait. Mars is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 from K2, but 6th from the ascendant. So it's 5th and 6th house. So 6th house, like that's more like the food, and 2nd house is food, I guess, but like service industry. So I made a mistake there. I caught it just now, but now that you were talking about the restaurant, I caught it. But yeah, like 6th house can be service industry. So please continue, and I apologize for making that weird
watch how this plays out. And I didn't really understand this until I got into astrology, and it was just like, whoa, holy moly, this is so profound. So my thing was like, I was very territorial. I was handling all this, all the tickets would come up. I'd be making all the drinks. I was probably the most efficient person there at doing it. And I could handle the people in front of me. But when I would get overflowed, I would be really snippety and snarky with the servers when they came up. And like, I could not, here's the thing, I could not allow help. And this is something I've had to learn. This is one of the lessons, right? From this combination, this Aries Libra.
So let me explain why he didn't want to ask for help, because Rahu is in his 8th house, which is trusting other people. And with the Libra, sign of Libra, that's like actually others. It's like having to do with trusting, really other types of relationship. And Rahu in the 8th, they don't believe that the universe is going to help them. They believe with Ketu in the 2nd that they have to do everything on their own.
Right.
And so that's how it can come up.
A certain amount of, like with Ketu in the 2nd, it's like they believe that they had to do everything on their own or I believe I had everything to do it on my own because I was competent. I was able to do it, right? Like I had a capability that was there. And you could see with the Lord, Mars being in the 6th house with Saturn, there's a sort of like this, like Mars and Saturn. I actually just made a video about Mars and Saturn yesterday. And it's when you get that whole compensatory, that compensation attitude of like, no, I can do this. There's more of this ability that can come from like, I need to show that I can do this because I'm afraid of failing at it. I don't want anyone to see how bad that I am actually struggling here, and there was so much of that going on. And like, when I looked at my chart and when I started studying it, and I was like, oh my goodness, it's all right here.
Yes, it is all right here. I was going to say something else about this. Also, the interesting thing about this, Ketu in the 2nd and Rahu in the 8th. Also, then we'd also look at Rahu's lords. So you have Venus ruling you, and Venus is combust, and it's not in great dignity. So you could actually struggle with your nodes. So instead of like kind of flowing and like beautifully learning the lessons, you could have more stress with the nodes. And with Ketu and Rahu in this axis in particular, for some reason, most of my friends have this. Like, I don't know why. And they have either had to like live with their parents as an adult, or will have had to spend a lot of times like relying on other people financially without wanting to. Like they will be like, Mom, Dad, I ran out of money, or their uncle will give them something to live off of. But I do see a lot of people as adults living at home with their parents.
All of those situations.
Yeah, and like that's like literally 99.5% of people. I actually haven't come across a person yet that hasn't had to do that with this axis. Like for some reason, it's like living at home as an adult combination. So, it's definitely something that if you have, it'll feel really frustrating. But again, it's because life is trying to get you to trust that you don't need to take care of all of your responsibilities. Like maybe like there's another way to take care of your responsibilities, and life is showing you that sometimes it's about trust and trust in the universe, trust in relationships, trusting in others. So that's how I examine the nodes. And I know you were asking me beforehand, like, do I look at them being exalted or not? I don't at all. And I actually don't, I know that I probably should, but I don't always look at Mars for Ketu and Saturn for Rahu. And I remind myself to do it every time. And I don't know, I think it's like an intuitive thing where it's like, I don't know for sure if I believe it. I don't know if I believe it. Like all my teachers tell me to look at Saturn, Rahu, look at Ketu for Mars, but part of me is like very resistant to it. So I haven't done enough research on Ketu Kujavat, Rahu Shanivat. Yeah.
See, I actually look at the Ketu Kujavat and the Rahu Shanivat. I actually look at that as, to understand Rahu better, you have to understand the nature of Saturn. I don't necessarily look at it like you have to see how Saturn is producing, because when you start getting into trying to understand Rahu, by understanding it by its Lord, I found a lot of so much, like that makes so much sense when I'm reading charts, but I haven't had to sit there and like, then all of a sudden I also have to look at how Saturn is performing as well. I find just the nature of the planet of Rahu with the Lord, more so than Rahu with, Saturn.
Yeah, exactly. So that's how I do it. And even though it seems like really straightforward, like, oh, the Lord is good, or the Lord is bad or combust, and this happens, it's still like an intuitive, you still have to use your intuition. You still have to understand that Rahu and Ketu are about the evolutionary process of the client, and the way that they're flowing through life and the way that they want to approach their evolutionary process will determine more so than anything else how they're going to be impacted on the nodes. And I know there are things that you can look at in a birth chart to see like if someone's going to work through their karma as well or not. But still, like Rahu and Ketu are so up to the individual consciousness of the soul that you'll sometimes see a difficult axis and the person's really beautifully handling that energy. So with Rahu and Ketu, it's sometimes good to like more so than tell the client, you can tell them some things, but have kind of a conversation about, I think, more than anything else. Yeah. I think there's a lag, so you probably feel like there's a lag, so you're taking a long time. The other thing I wanted to say was it was cool that you reached out to me because right now I have all these makeover videos, and the next planets that I'm shooting for are Rahu and Ketu. Since I'm in Costa Rica still, I'm doing all of like the pre-production on those videos, and then at the end of August I'll be shooting them, and you guys will all see them in September. But whenever I study a planet to make these makeover videos, it's actually like a very cool, I like to use the term psychomagic act, where I start to experience the full force of each of the planets that I'm doing a makeover for, based off of my birth charts. So right now I'm studying Rahu, or I was before I left, and it's crazy how full of a Rahu experience I've had based off of where Rahu is in my birth chart. So I'm like, Rahu is the Karaka for foreign lands. Like I'm living in a foreign country, but then of course, based off of the placement of Rahu in my chart, it's been like 1000% of that energy. And it's kind of cool that it's taking me so long to film it because I'll get to really soak it in, but I'm in my Rahu, my consciously determined Rahu stage of study. And so it's good that we're talking about the nodes now. And if you guys want to learn more about Rahu and Ketu, then go to my channel. I think I'll be uploading the Rahu makeover video in September, and then I'll edit the Ketu one and put that up by November. So that'll be like as much as you can learn about Rahu and Ketu in 20 minutes, 15 to 20 minutes.
Awesome. And now about the dashas of Rahu and Ketu. I remember when I first started studying astrology, like if someone was in a Mars dasha, I could say something, or Jupiter dasha. But when I got to the nodes, I was always like, I don't know what to say about this. And it's and do you have any pointers to help people when they're studying astrology and someone comes to them that's in and they want to talk about the dasha of a node? How would you go about that?
Yeah, so it had to be the last question that I answer because I have a client right like in 15 minutes. So hopefully this will be a good answer. It'll be a good thing to end. But how I look at it is I always look at where Rahu is. So actually a good way to do this is you can go to screen, you can go to, no, I'm going to forget. I always forget my, not Avashtas. Actually, yeah. You can go to the Avashta screen and you can go to mutual agenda. And you can kind of look at what agenda Rahu has. So Rahu had, an 8th house agenda in your chart. It's placed in the 8th, and then it has an agenda based off of where it's placed in different karakas, which are like different things that are important in your life that the planet. During Rahu Dasha, Rahu is definitely going to bring about 8th house things. So you are in a Rahu Dasha right now, right?
Yes.
Yeah, so that means eighth house. Like you probably spent most of this time like either going through huge transformation, studying astrology, being really interested in the occult, trying to dig into the deeper layers of who you are. Like maybe finances were like a huge theme. You probably started your business, and so you're making money in an eighth house kind of way. So the eighth house lessons will come up for you. And then like if we look at your Dara Karaka, your Rahu Dasha is activating third from your Dara Karaka. So like maybe dealing with your wife's siblings, maybe dealing with, maybe even in your wife's life, like things come up with competition or workers or, I mean, I'm just trying to give you like a little bit of a quick understanding of that. So you get that. And then you can also look at Rahu's Lord. So Rahu is ruled over by Venus. So Venus is a planet that we can look at, and you can look at the agenda of Venus to see a little bit more of what that time period is going to be like. And you can see Venus and Rahu both have an eighth house agenda. So it's like a lot of eighth house stuff for you during this period. So that's how I personally like to look at the nodes. And then I think one of the kind of basic ways of looking at the nodes is like people say during a Rahu or Ketu Dasha, like life can just be kind of crazy and like unpredictable. And I think people say that because like, as I was mentioning before, the nodes are so much dependent upon the personal will and the personal growth that the individual is wanting to take on in this lifetime. So you can obviously see how that.
I'll give you a story of something that happened in Rahu Dasha. So this was during my when I was 36, which meant this is the exact time when my Rahu in the sky was above my natal Rahu. The exact day of.
Okay.
I
like your Rahu return.
And I passed out and woke up in an ambulance and lost consciousness, fell down. I guess I was having convulsions or shaking. Never had anything like this happen before in my life. And when I was sitting there in the back of the ambulance, and here's another thing that you learn about that I learned about my Rahu Dasha was like, I'm sitting there in the back of the ambulance. I'm like, hurry up and get me to the hospital. And let's get to the part where they tell me they don't know what's wrong with me and I'm perfectly fine. Fast forward.
Yes, right.
Later, and then I get to that point where they're like, well, we ran all these tests and we don't know what's wrong with you. And then here's the thing, like Rahu is representative of viruses, right? And poisons and things of that nature. Well, what I was told by two different sources from basically two different healers, I was told that I had a virus in the heart. Very interesting. And
yes,
that's a fascinating, that's a way. And then the thing that I find most fascinating about it, because here's an eighth house event, right? Rahu was coming through my eighth house. Rahu was triggering Rahu during a Rahu pattern or during a Rahu Dasha. It's like, this is when you start to see events really crystallize in astrology. Now, it's not always going to represent this. Don't expect this to happen to you. If anybody else has Rahu in this specific formulation. But anyhow, I just thought I'd share that little story.
No, that's an amazing story. And I think people don't realize how powerful nodal returns are, but they are extremely powerful. And typically when you're going through one, you'll come to an astrologer and you'll be like, I'm at a turning point in my life. Like you actually already know it, but to the extent that that nodal return will change your life, well, I said that weird, but you don't really understand the extent that that nodal return will change.
And I would actually say that even the cross nodal exchange every 9 years, where you have Rahu, your natal going over your Rahu's over your Ketu basically. I said those are very big changing points as well too.
Yes, they really, really are. And I do have to go, so I just before
I know I have a bunch of things
don't get the chance to
all at once at the same time too. So
yes. Well, I love your purple room.
Thank you. This is
so nice.
Yeah.
And also, it was really fun to speak with you. Whenever I get to speak with talented astrologers, I come to a bunch of new insights, and it's really, really fun for me to think about things from a different perspective. So yes, thank you for having me on.
Absolutely, and thank you for being on. It was absolute pleasure, Nicole. And have a wonderful
Same here.
eclipse.
You too, and I do hope we get to do this again soon because I think we waited a really long time. But I'll be doing more interviews on my channel for at least for the next month because I won't have my nice camera until I go pick it up from the US. All right. Thanks so much. And everyone out there, have a nice eclipse. Don't get scared. Like, you've been under this eclipse energy or this Rahu Ketu energy for over a year now. So just learn what you need to and understand that everything that happens during an eclipse is kind of fated. So flow with it.
Right.
All right.
Namaste.
All right. Namaste. Bye.
Bye. Okay.